What's up, everybody? Welcome to the By the Horns podcast presented by Toyota. And always know that Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand. So find yours and shine on Toyota. Let's go places. Cam Smith riding with my guy, Drew Stevens of the Bigs. Drew, we had the first game of the regular season, the first of 82 for the Chicago Bulls down in the NO. New Orleans was the scene. An opportunity was there for this team heading into this matchup because there was concern of if DeJounte Murray would play. He was a game-time decision because he was dealing with a family issue. Zion Williamson, who was eventually ruled out with the illness before the game. And then there was also the concern of what and who the Pelicans would bring starting five-wise with Zion Williamson out. So when you have that factor and you have the possibility of the Bulls trying to steal a win to spoil the New Orleans Pelicans season opener, you're like, man, this team could really pull it off. And that's something that we saw in the first half, especially from Zach LaVine, who went crazy from three. 5 of 6 from three, hit his first 5 threes. And you're looking at the variety of how he made his shots, Drew. You're like, this is the Zach LaVine that we remember with this Bulls team. When healthy, is one of the better scorers in the NBA. I mean, he was flamethrowing from so many different parts of the floor, and the Bulls are really active on the defensive end and getting some runouts as well. So first, let's set it up here when you think about this Bulls team entering this ball game and some of those early expectations that the team had. But as they continue to play throughout that first half and seeing Zach LaVine, Drew, you had to sit back and say to yourself, okay, this team, we've heard them talk training camp, preseason, shoot around before today's game. They're putting some effort and some action behind those words.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it looked good for a stint there, especially Zach, like we talked about. It looked familiar to the game he had against the Memphis Grizzlies, where we saw him look like the old Zach LaVine, just pulling up, catch and shoot threes from all around the arc. He looked really good. Had Adam Amin and Stacey King going crazy. But, you know, things hit a snag in that third quarter, and I know we'll get into that more, where they just got so sloppy with the ball. They ended up turning the ball over 21 times. New Orleans scored 30 points off of those turnovers. To put that in perspective, the Bulls only scored over 30 points in one of the quarters tonight. So that's crazy, man, the amount of turnovers that they ended up having and how they kind of killed all the momentum they had going into that second half. Billy Donovan has spoken about how, you know, he wants the team to play with pace, play fast, but at the same time, there's got to be some caution too. You don't want to get in too much of a breakneck pace where you're just being sloppy with the ball, careless. Right. A lot of times I felt like in the half-court setting, and Stacey King spoke to this as well, Nikola Vucevic had his man sealed like directly under the basket, and sometimes guys were nailing shots as opposed to hitting him with the pass. Other times guys were, you know, ignoring him down low and, you know, not hitting the shots that they were taking instead. So it was crazy, man. In this day and age where teams are lofting up threes by the caseload, man, the 2-point basket is not as valued as it once was. But I mean, Vooch was like right in the restricted area, man. And you wonder if they would have hit him a couple times, if that would have slowed down New Orleans' attack going back on the other side of the court.
Yeah, and that's one of those things with Nikola Vucevic, and we'll dive into that a little more because he finished with 21 and 11. And Vooch just being Vooch, right? I mean, ever since he came to Chicago, he's been a walking double-double, and that's what he's averaged in the seasons in that Bulls uniform. So we'll dive into that a little more. But getting back to that first half, we mentioned Zach LaVine and how he was going off, but then also all eyes were on Lonzo Ball, not only because he's just a medical marvel, but then also he had a little extra to his game because he's playing against his former team in the New Orleans Pelicans. We know that he was drafted by the Lakers. The Lakers traded him in that Anthony Davis deal to the Pelicans. And Lonzo even said during shoot-around before the game, Drew, that, you know, he's going to have a different type of energy just because this game means a little more since he's playing back against the Pelicans. And he still has some friends and some guys that he keeps in contact with over there. But you're looking at his stat line and what he was able to do off the bench for this Bulls team. A guy that played 13 minutes, he had 4 assists, had a few turnovers. And when I say a few, I correct myself, only had 1 turnover, but had 5 points. So the first game for Lonzo, we know that Billy Donovan is keeping him at a max of 16 minutes. there were certain moments, especially a lob that he had with Zach LaVine in the second half, where you saw the shades of old Lonzo, but even just not even the shades of old Lonzo, but some of the shades of Lonzo that we saw in the preseason for this Bulls team when he got action, when he was in that offensive system and getting guys set up. So for me, watching Lonzo on that court look comfortable, not acknowledge his knee at all, that left knee that he's had 3 surgeries on, and just go out there and hoop. And that's something that he's been wanting to do for the past 2.5 seasons because he wasn't able to do that. It's something that you have to applaud him with, but also understanding with this team, this dynamic of what he has to bring in those games that he will play, because he's already ruled out back-to-backs. And we'll get to that conversation about the Bulls' next game, which is going to be the second game of the season against the Milwaukee Bucks in Milwaukee. And then they turn around for the home opener on this Saturday against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Which game will Lonzo play? So getting back to just seeing him on the court, it was great. This team in the first half looked to be a team that was setting themselves up for a nice steal in New Orleans to ruin and spoil their home opener. And speaking of the Pelicans, but Drew, the third quarter happened. And the third quarter was something that, in my opinion, erased all of the work that the Bulls laid down in the first half. I'm talking about Zach LaVine knocking down his first 5 threes, Josh Giddey getting into the rim, Lonzo Ball making plays, Nikola Vucevic putting in work, Ayo Dosunmu off the bench getting downhill and making plays for himself. But then it felt like it was that halftime lull coming out of the break where the urgency just dropped off completely. And I'm not sure and Billy Donovan listening to his press conferences and from the players, having to hear from them of what changed for them from halftime to really when the third quarter started. Because when the third quarter started, the Pelicans understood what the urgency was because the Bulls only trailed by 1, but also the Pelicans made sure they capitalized on those live ball turnovers that the Bulls had. And you mentioned 21 turnovers for the Bulls, 30 points off those turnovers by the Pelicans. But just go back to that third quarter for me, Drew, because I'm already there mentally, and I want to get it out of my head. But the reality is this Bulls team did not show up in that third quarter and ultimately cooked themselves and dug themselves a hole, which they couldn't get out of.
Yeah, they did. And I think, it's first game of a new season, first season without DeMar DeRozan. You know that had he been on the court, kind of that stabilizing factor.
Right.
The first couple of turnovers happen. He kind of gets the team back in order, gets them a bucket or two, make sure that they stop the bleeding and stop the carelessness with the basketball. I'll be interested to see tomorrow, just hearing back what Billy Donovan has to say, what some of the players have to say. But we've seen this team kind of struggle with his urgency. Now, a lot of times it felt like it would kind of rear its ugly head to start games last season and or the season before that. Tonight, for whatever reason, happened coming out of the locker room. I'm not sure if they were throwing passes that they thought were there or were they overpassing, maybe not taking shots that were open and thinking that they had a better shot for a teammate coming up. But, man, they gave up 36 points in that third quarter, man, and they were pretty much playing from behind ever since. And they just don't This isn't a team that's, gonna do well playing from behind like that. As great as a tough shot maker as Zach LaVine is, we know that his decision making sometimes can go awry, and obviously we saw that with him leading the team with 7 turnovers of his own, and then his shot kind of went south in the second half as well. So yeah, man, that third quarter just kind of killed all the momentum, and because of it, they lost a grand opportunity to take advantage of some guys being out for the Pelicans. And now they go into this next 4-game stretch, as you called it, against the Bucks, against the Thunder, against the Grizzlies, against the Magic, and it's not going to get any easier.
That's Halloween scary. That's Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, Jason, the clown from It, Pennywise, all of that mixed in together. That's how scary that road is for the Bulls in the next 4. But to your point in terms of how this team looked in the third quarter, and really you saw some of those signs in the first half as well, it's this new style of pace that Billy Donovan wants to play. Up tempo, get the ball out, push, run in transition. And he knows, and also these players know, that they have the makeup to finally play at that speed. They didn't have that before when DeMar DeRozan was on this team. And it's no knock to DeMar DeRozan, but Zach LaVine even said this before the Bulls game today during shoot-around, that with DeMar on the court, they have to play a certain way. And again, it's no knock to DeMar, but now with the players that they have the athletes to get up and down and play that up-tempo style. But you have to remember, when you play that style and it's the first game of the season, and that first game of the season is on the road, and you have defenders like a Herb Jones, who was very pesky against the Bulls, especially Zach LaVine in the second half, Jose Alvarado, Grand Theft Alvarado, who gets after you, right? I mean, you have that. Yves Missy was a guy that showed a lot of bright spots on the defensive end. It felt like he was blocking everything, like a young Patrick Ewing in the national championship against North Carolina, and a young Michael Jordan, where John Thompson told him, just try and swat everything. I don't care if you get a goaltending call. But he was all over the place. So you have that dynamic, and then you have the former Chicago Bull, Mr. Wu, Javonte Green, of course, wanting to do some things against his old team, and he did that, getting in passing lanes, and we saw Javonte Green just do what Javonte Green does best, and that's getting out in transition and dunking. So we have to understand that this makeup defensively of the Pelicans, with just how athletic and just long they are on the perimeter and also in the lane, that caused the Bulls to put themselves into some tough situations. Drew, how many times did we see either Kobe White or Zach LaVine or Josh Giddey get cut and stuck in the air trying to make a pass, and it ended up being a turnover, right? Because of that length of the Pelicans defense. So those are things that I think that they will watch the tape on and understand if they get in the lane, they're trying to get in the lane to score or dump it off. But the last thing that they want to do is leave their feet and find themselves in an angle or position where they can't make that pass. And you saw that time and time again throughout this ball game for this Bulls team. So I'm going to give the Bulls a little bit of grace. We got to do this. Give them a little bit of grace. It's the first game of the season. They're on the road again. As I mentioned, with this Pelicans defense, they will get after you. And especially if it's an up and down game, you're looking at a Pelicans team that has played that game and are better suited in terms of their philosophy and just their team makeup of doing that. And remember, this is the first time that this Bulls group is doing this in terms of an up-tempo type of style. So give them a little grace, but still at the same time, though, we can't let them off the hook. You can't have 21 turnovers and allow your opponent to score 30 points off those turnovers and expect to win a ball game in the NBA. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, this is going to be the challenge for Billy Donovan and this group that he has now. You know, in playing at a quicker pace, there's almost more responsibility to take care of the ball.
Yeah,
decisions have to be made quicker. They have to be more sound. Like, it's
and
not
also and also other guys off the ball have to get themselves into the right spots as well. So exactly. I see your point on this, that, you know, the ball handler has to make sure that they take care of the ball, but it's up to the other four guys in that transition to get to their spots, just in case they run into a situation that ball handler does. If they leave their feet, then those guys have to have some kind of safety net or safety valve to make themselves available for those passes.
Exactly. We don't want to put too much on it because it is game one. It's going to be a learning curve for these guys. Obviously, even though Zach
and we got 82, we got 81 more games. We got 81 more to go. So.
Exactly. But, even though you got Zach out there and Kobe and Vooch, like, you still have young guys. You know, we saw Julian Phillips be the seventh man coming off the bench. I think Lonzo was the first guy off the bench. Mata's got some time. There's some guys that are going to need some reps in this up-tempo style of play where they can grow comfortable with catching the ball and having to make a split-second decision whether or not they're going to penetrate and play off of closeouts, kick to the next guy, drive to the rim, or take a shot. So, of course, we got to give them some grace. And I know Billy's going to coach them up and try to get them to play more under control come Friday against the Bucks. But this is not a team that can afford to turn the ball over 21 times and shoot it. What was it? 34% from beyond the arc, 29% from beyond the arc. So it's not a winning recipe at all to start the season off.
Yeah, and let's also take into account of Kobe White not having the typical Kobe White game, right? Only 10 points, 0 of 5 from three. And Drew, you threw out a stat on Kobe in terms of what he does his first 10 games shooting the basketball from three. And I love the stat that you tweeted out or posted on X, whatever you say. It's on X, it's on Twitter, whatever you call it. But go back to that post, man, and that stat on Kobe White in terms of what he does shooting the ball his first 10 games, because I think today was a microcosm of that stretch that he has in his first 10 games in the season.
Yeah, when I tweeted it out, I just tweeted that, he was 0 of 5 from the three-point line at that time. Dating back to last season, there were only 3 games of the first 10 where he shot better than 28% from beyond the arc. So it was a rough kind of wave into the season for Kobe last season. We saw a little bit of that Wednesday night, obviously, with the three-point shot. He was trying to get to the rim, to his credit, and he did a pretty good job of finishing. But hopefully this kind of fluctuating up and down shooting that we've seen from Kobe White, that's kind of become somewhat commonplace for him. A little bit of a streaky shooter. Hopefully it doesn't last too long for the Bulls' sake. I do want to say that another one of the guys that looked good tonight was Ayo Dosunmu, finishing at the rim. Some of the passes he threw out there, I think he hit Jalen Smith with a nice pass for a layup. So, I mean, there were some good things that come out of today. Just team basketball-wise, they got a lot to clean up.
Yeah, speaking of Kobe White downhill at the rim, 4-6 at the rim against the Pelicans, and also Ayo Dosunmu perfect at the rim. So we know those guys. And I always go back to the playing game against the Atlanta Hawks, where second half for sure, definitely for Ayo getting downhill and scoring the basketball. It's the same thing for Kobe, but also pairing that up with what his outside shot is from 3. So he's going to find his rhythm and get to a spot where he is comfortable. Again, it's the first game of the season, but let's just call a spade a spade. A lot of things that you cannot do in the NBA and expect to win. But there were issues as well that we saw rebounding the basketball, even though both teams finished even at 53 apiece on the glass. But it was just those continuation rebounds and, offensive rebounds for the Pelicans that put the Bulls and kept the Bulls on the defensive end. So when you have moments like that, and this is something that we highlighted on the By the Horns podcast, is that everyone has to try and stay in to help Nikola Vucevic rebound the basketball. As tempting as it is to leak out, I get it. And we saw some highlight plays today, a couple of dunks from Zach. We saw the lob from Lonzo to Zach and wanting to get out and make those plays. You have to rebound by committee, gain rebound and stay in and make sure that possession is officially yours when you secure that basketball. So, again, things that I'm sure it is going to be a very detailed film session for this Bulls team tomorrow with Billy Donovan. A lot of guys are going to be highlighted. A lot of guys are going to be called out. This is nothing new. This is what Billy Donovan does, and he does it in a way to help them. Not saying that he's trying to put them on blast, because at the end of the day, all of these guys are professionals, and it's about the team and wanting you to get better. And I'm sure Billy Donovan will mold this thing and say, hey, we have to be better in these situations, whether it's a lack of urgency, whether it's a lack of getting those loose 50-50 basketballs. You saw the Pelicans, as I mentioned, have a better urgency, a more of an intention of getting the basketball when it was a loose ball or on the offensive glass to continue possessions. And also just them in transition as well. The Pelicans really thrived in transition, and transition defense is something that you have to have on your side if you expect to win ball games in the NBA, Drew. But again, getting back to some more of those positives, you talked about Ayo Dosunmu, also Kobe White going downhill, and you have to throw some shine and some light into, and you mentioned him already a little bit earlier when we started the podcast, Nikola Vucevic, 21 points, 11 rebounds. He is one of those guys that, for me, Drew, when I kept hearing Billy Donovan and watching this team in preseason play up-tempo, they're talking up-tempo, I started to think about Nikola Vucevic. And I'm like, man, I love to hear that they want to get up and down because they have the athletes. But how does Vooch fit into that type of philosophy and scheme? And what we saw against the Pelicans is there were a lot of times that Vooch was forgotten about on the offensive end. Like when that initial transition is stopped and Vooch is the trailer on some plays, it would get reversed back up to him, and he would either take a 3, and he actually knocked down a 3. I believe he was 1 of 2 from the 3-point line. So that's something that he wanted to improve upon this season because he shot very poorly last season. In fact, his lowest percentage, I believe, was 29% of his career from the arc. But he would have those situations where he would have shot opportunities as that trail big from 3 or a catch and rip and get to the rim. But it was more of those opportunities that you mentioned. Him on the block with a mismatch, sometimes against Javonte Green or even with Daniel Tice just on his back, and you want him to get that basketball. So in those moments when that up-tempo or that transition, that fast break is stopped, you have to look on those ball reversals when Vucevic comes off of being that trail big and finds himself in that painted area on that block, you got to give him a touch.
Especially when he's sealing. Like, I'm not the biggest advocate of giving him post touches, like on the block, because he hasn't shown to be a very efficient post scorer the last couple of seasons. But if he has got his man sealed under the basket, you've got to hit him. You've got to hit him. And maybe in that way against certain teams and certain matchups, he can be similar to a DeMar DeRozan where he can help you stop the bleeding. You know, he can stop the opposing team from getting out on the break and running out on you before you have a time to set the defense that we know, has some issues. So it was a good night for Vooch individually. I think that we could have seen his stats be even more eye-popping tonight. But again, I'm sure they'll go back to the film. I'm sure he'll let his teammates know. Billy could advocate for him as well. But it was a tough night in terms of finding him under the rim. There were several times, again, where I'm telling you, man, he was right up under the rim and looked like he could have done a mic and drill several times tonight.
He was 6 of 7 right at the rim, Drew, and inside the painted area, he was 7 of 9. Yeah. So when you have those type of numbers, and again, I understand when you're down like the Bulls were in that third quarter and you're trying to just throw haymakers in the form of shooting threes and want to get out in transition just to get back within that deficit, you got to understand that there are moments where you have to get that basketball to Vooch, and I'm with you. You're not expecting this offense to run through Nikola Vucevic, but also when he has a guy pinned on his back and those arms are spread. Drew, you know this as somebody that played basketball that is 6'6", and I know you've done a lot of mic and drills, work in your basketball career, and when you work to get your defender on your back and you have those arms spread big and you got them up high, you're like, give me the basketball. I'm working for this. And even if it's a situation where you get that touch, if that help defender comes down, then you have that opportunity to kick it back out to a possible shooter that might be helping off from your teammates. So it's just those situations where just a touch here and a touch there could change the dynamic and change the momentum of how the game is being played for a little bit.
And maybe you even force them to start double teaming, which can open up the perimeter. But to your point, if you see Vooch, his whole front is open. You can see the Bulls. You can see the number.
See the number 9 right there.
That's the bullseye. That just screams, hit me, hit me.
Yeah, no doubt. Again, that will be something I'm sure that Billy Donovan will look at film-wise, man. But it was a storm. Again, as we mentioned in that third quarter, of course, Brandon Ingram, DeJounte Murray, two guys, one of the best combos in the NBA, in my opinion. If you disagree with me, then go argue with your uncle that didn't make his JV team. But let's look at these two guys because you have CJ McCollum. Let's throw him in there as well. But more so when it comes to Brandon Ingram and DeJounte Murray. And DeJounte Murray finished with a double-double, 14 points, 10 assists. And you throw in the 33 from Brandon Ingram, the 23 from CJ McCollum. The three-headed monster that is there without Zion proved to be difficult for this Bulls team. And when you look across the NBA, Drew, teams have 2, 3, sometimes even 4 guys offensively that can attack you from all 3 levels and score at all 3 levels. And we just saw a sample size of that tonight without Zion in the form of B.I., Brandon Ingram, C.J. McCollum, and also DeJounte Murray. So this is where we get back to that 4-game stretch that's coming up for this Bulls team. So game 1 is over. It is finito. 123-111. The Bulls fall by 12 against the Pelicans to start the season. But this is where it could get critical for this group. And that's why tomorrow's film session, the shoot-around heading into Milwaukee, is very crucial because this Bucks team got their win against the Philadelphia 76ers. They had their home opener on Friday, welcoming in the Bulls. And we know that Milwaukee-Chicago series, it gets physical, right? And I know the Bucks have been on the winning end more times recently than the Bulls have, but you're looking at a Bucks team that, one, is coming to the season pissed off. 2, understanding that they're right there with this Boston Celtics team, the reigning NBA champions. And also 3, they want to take care of business and clean up some things that hampered them last season where they had some L's against some teams that they very well should have beaten. And I'm not saying that that's going to be the case on Friday against this Bulls team, but this group with Doc Rivers understands that they're on a mission to try and hoist that Larry O'Brien trophy for the 3rd time in their franchise history. And you're looking at a Giannis Antetokounmpo, You're looking at a Damian Lillard, a guy that can get after it. You're looking at a guy in former Bull Bobby Portis. Those are three guys alone that can score at all three levels and get after you. Now, Chris Middleton, another one of their starters and star players, is going to be out because he's still recovering from the ankle surgeries that he had over the offseason. But this Bucks team is equipped to do even more damage than the New Orleans Pelicans did against the Bulls in game one because they have more shooters around them. So that's why it's going to be critical for this team to understand that not only do you have to punch first, but you have to keep punching when you're on the road, Drew.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think that to make it even more challenging, I don't think we should expect Lonzo Ball to play Friday, given that he's not going to be playing in back-to-backs for the foreseeable future. I don't know why. I don't see them playing him Friday and then sitting him out in the home opener against the Thunder. That just doesn't make sense to me. So it's going to be a challenge for them, no doubt. You talked about punching. I don't know, man. Like there's Mike Tyson's and then there's, Glass Joe. I'm not saying the Bulls are Glass Joe, but you're talking about a championship contender in the Milwaukee Bucks. Yeah. You said a team that's hungry that probably just watched Boston just mop the floor with New York on opening night on Tuesday, and is probably looking at the standings like, man, we can compete with the Celtics over there. So another one of a challenging stretch of games for them. Again, man, they can take care of the ball. That's going to give them a chance, but they can't be sloppy with the basketball.
Yeah, not at all. So you have to take care of what you need to take care of on the road, and that's the basketball. You can't be careless with that thing. And again, I will continue to say this throughout the season when this topic comes up or these games come up, but you cannot continuously do one thing bad and poor and expect to win a basketball game, especially in this league with how teams shoot the three, can make the three, and you can see a deficit balloon from 10 to 20 to 30 to 40. And that's just the NBA that we have today because of the volume of three-point attempts and everybody's hunting those shots. So I think with this group, though, this is a great learning experience, right, moving forward. And we talk about the Bucks being motivated off of last season and what everything else is going on in the East. But the Bulls should be motivated from this loss against the Pelicans because, again, 24 minutes of this ball game, Drew, they were right there. And I know that there's another 24 minutes that you have to play. I get that. But they have to mirror the same effort that they had in the first half with the second half, and we'll see how it goes down against the Milwaukee Bucks. When you look at possible matchup options for this Bulls team that they can maybe exploit on Friday in Milwaukee, what comes to mind? Because I think that Zach LaVine, for me, with what we saw in New Orleans, can really exploit some options against the Bucks defense.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, the Bucks, ever since they lost Drew Holiday, have kind of been lacking that on-ball hawk, the on-ball defender. Yeah. So, I mean, it could be it could be Zach, it could be Kobe that we see kind of get hot and be that top scorer for this team come Friday. I'm interested to see what happens with the rotation. We saw Billy go pretty much 11 deep with Matas Buzelis being the 11th man tonight. We saw our guy THT get some time. I was a little surprised that he got into the mix in a game that Lonzo Ball also played. So I'm interested to see what happens in a game that Lonzo isn't there for the Bulls. So what did you think about the rotation? Did you think it would be this deep? Did you think that the guys who got in, when they got in, would do so?
Yeah, you know what? I expected this rotation to be this deep because on the Chicago lead with David Hall and Brooke Fletcher, David interviewed Billy Donovan on the Mully and Hall show on Wednesday morning, and Billy spoke to just what this rotation would be for this team. And he said that it would go 10 deep, and you expect that, right? For a team that is very guard heavy, you have 9 guards, but then also you have young guys that are trying to really, let's just be real about it, find their identity in the NBA. And I'm talking about Julian Phillips. I'm talking about Dalen Terry. And, of course, Matas Buzelis. Those are 3 guys alone off of that Bulls bench at the 4 position that will be fighting for minutes and really trying to outshine each other just so they can get and maintain their spot in that rotation. And you think about veterans that didn't even get in the game tonight. Drew, Torrey Craig, Javon Carter failed to see any minutes. So, for those 2 guys, they want to see some action, especially against a team like the Milwaukee Bucks, where it won't be as up-tempo and you might find yourself in more half-court positions and moments. So maybe it's a situation where Torrey Craig is in that rotation with it still being a 10-man rotation on Friday against the Milwaukee Bucks. So I'm not surprised that there were situations for Billy, especially late, when he decided to go with Ayo Dosunmu over Patrick Williams, because it was more of an up-tempo decision that he tried to make. And again, the Bulls were trailing by double digits at that point. So it was more of like a catch-up. We need to push pace, push tempo, and have more on-ball defenders just to create havoc. So I get that move from Billy Donovan. But the rotation was as expected, right? I expected to see certain guys in that rotation like Lonzo, like Jalen Smith, like Ayo. We knew for sure that those guys were going to get in and log minutes. But also when you have guys like Miles Buzelis who logged just under 5 minutes, I thought that he would get a little more time right out there. But if you're going to be on that court, you got to put in some work. And Modest was over from the field, didn't really provide an impact for this Bulls team. So you look at that situation moving forward and saying that, again, it's a learning situation and learning experience for Modest. So the rotation to me was in line with what we've heard from Billy Donovan as he described this team and what they have and what it would be in a 10-man rotation. Were you surprised with anything in certain names getting more minutes than others? Or were you just like, all right, well, he really went 10 deep?
I was surprised. Again, I was surprised with the THT a little bit because I thought I would be more, inclined to see him on nights where Lonzo didn't play. Yeah. And I was kind of surprised that Modest was the 11th man, but it's going to be interesting seeing him and Julian Phillips battle it out because they kind of are similarly yoked right now. It may just come down to who's knocking down, those catch and shoot threes.
Yeah.
And we also didn't see Dalen Terry either until later on in the ball game. So, just like the players, Billy's kind of ironing out the kinks and seeing who can give him what on any given night.
Yeah, and so there'll be something to keep an eye on, not even just for Friday against the Milwaukee Bucks, but just for the rest of the 81 games, right? So this rotation is something that we've discussed on By the Horns before about Billy Donovan, how he handles this roster, how guys get certain minutes, what will be a set rotation. Right now it's 10. I wouldn't be surprised, Drew, if it's chopped down one, maybe a couple of guys when it comes to this rotation, just because you're going to find out who's going to be who as you get towards the meatier part of the season. Mm-hmm. And that's around maybe close to All-Star break, right? Or maybe even a little bit before that. But this team does have options in terms of young athletes that can get out on the floor and change some things. When you go back to game one against the Pelicans and just seeing Zach out there get buckets, it was like, all right, cool. Sitting down with Zach, media day, and just his posture when he was sitting with me, Drew, he was just kind of like off to the side like this, just ready to hoop. And I'm like, man, you just look like you're ready to hoop. And that's what he was ready to do preseason-wise, but also when it came to the first half against the Pelicans, man, it was really kind of reassuring that, the old Zach is back.
It was. I think coming into this game, the last 5 meetings against the Pelicans, he had scored 30 or more points. So it looked like he was in line to do that again, especially in that second quarter where he was just filling it up and he was kind of giving all Bulls fans a sense of nostalgia there from what we had become so accustomed to seeing him do on the court. But Zach, ultra confident guy, like he's always exuded that. I'm sure he had a little more fire in him going against his fellow Seattle buddy, DeJounte Murray. So, man, one of the brighter spots of the game, at least for a certain period of time, was watching him shoot the basketball the way he did. He was shooting the lights out. It all came to a screeching halt in that third quarter, man. They're going to have to learn how to adapt to not having certain guys on this team anymore, and guys have to just be a little bit more responsible with the basketball. Even though they're trying to play this up-tempo style of play, they've got to savor every possession. And, you spoke to it earlier about guys jumping up in the air to make passes. Like certain guys can get away with that. Yeah. The Tyrese Halliburtons of the world and other guys of that nature. But yeah, man, they got a ways to go. They got a ways to go.
They have a ways to go, so we'll see how it works out for them. But getting back to the turnovers of the 21, you had your guards, your ball handlers with 17 of them. And I believe the top 3 ball handlers for this Bulls team and Josh Giddey and Zach LaVine and Kobe White, 14 turnovers. combined for those guys. Zach having 7 of them. But Zach did lead all scorers for the Bulls in points with 27. The game high score for that game against the Pelicans was Brandon Ingram. BI just looked like BI. I mean, a guy that I think is going to be an all-star again. And I know it's so tough in the Western Conference to be an all-star, especially at that position as a forward. But BI for sure looked like the old BI with those 33 points. So he led everybody in scoring right there.
Could it be so long? He did so long, man.
There were different situations where he would just drive the basket, and it felt like, I don't know, he was like Dalsim from Street Fighter, man. Like his arms just like stretched back, and he just extended the ball out to get layups or get second chance points on taps on his own missed shots. And that's the difficulty of guarding a guy like Brandon Ingram, who again is one of those all 3 level scorers. Can knock down shots from 3, as we saw against the Bulls. Also gets into his mid-range game is lethal, but can still get to the basket and has that wiry strength to finish at the rim. So he presents a matchup problem for anybody in the NBA, not just the Bulls, anybody in the NBA, Drew.
He does, and there were times where he was matched up against Kobe White. There were times where I felt like Patrick Williams started out on him, and he and Giddey gave up the switch too too easy on BI. And, you know, to his credit, to their credit, Kobe, some of the other guys, Zach a couple times, like they did well to kind of body him up a little bit.
Yeah.
But BI is just one of those guys similar to Kevin Durant where, you know, your only hope is to try to push him out as far away from the basket as you can and just try to get a hand in his face because you're not going to block his shot. Right. You just have to make things as uncomfortable as you can before he, you know, establishes position and catches the rock.
Yeah, because when he catches it and he's going up for a shot, it's almost like Larry Bird. And Larry Bird was 6'10". Like when he puts the ball behind his head, kind of similar to what B.I. does, you're not blocking this. I don't care who you are. It's like the old Jake Shuttlesworth shot from He Got Game, but Larry Bird for sure had the nastiest shot from behind the head and would just flick it. And sometimes you see that with B.I. where he would just flick it. And you're not going to block that shot, especially when those guys elevate. So, again, a matchup problem for anybody in the NBA. But it's one of those things for Patrick Williams playing that 4 position, Drew. This is what he's going to see night in and night out because, and correct me if I'm wrong, and we can have a conversation on this before we get towards the end of the By the Horns podcast, but I feel that the 4 position in the NBA, to me, it used to be the point guard. But now the 4 position in the NBA is the toughest position to guard, one with the rules and the hand checking, right? But then also just how guys are able to draw fouls and finish. And you're talking about guys that are 6'10", sometimes even 7 foot, like Kevin Durant. KD, you're a 7-footer. Stop playing. You should be noted as a center and not a forward. But guys like that again can score at all 3 levels and give you problems. This is a situation for Patrick Williams where I'm sure he knows this, Drew, but it's not going to be any nights off for him guarding that 4 spot.
It's not. And that's why he's so valuable to this team on that side of the ball, more so than the offensive side right now. Like they don't really have another guy that is his size. Like Pat's tall, but he's built. You know what I'm saying? He's been built. He's got that grown man frame, and they're going to lean on him to provide the type of defense that they need him to. Otherwise, you know, they're going to be dependent on the slider built Julian Phillips or Modest Buzelis. Sometimes they may go to Dalen Terry. Those guys just are more wiry than they are thick. So man, it's hard to kind of pinpoint what position guys are nowadays because they toggle so much. But yeah, man, to your point, guys are long, athletic. They put the ball on the deck. They just got a bevy of moves. The footwork for a lot of these guys is just outstanding. So, I mean, he's got his work cut out for him. He's had it cut out for him for a while now. Yeah. But to his credit, he's delivered on the defensive side of the ball more often than not. He's one of the better wing defenders, I think. Obviously, he's the best probably wing defender that the Bulls have.
No doubt.
Yeah, not necessarily point of attack, like in terms of getting around screens or through screens, but just kind of playing guys head up, the Tatums of the world, who also kind of toggle in different positions. But man, they're going to be depending on him a lot this season.
And Pat Will is not afraid of the smoke, and I think ultimately he gets better throughout the season guarding that position. And so that's what you want for a guy that he understands. Yeah, he understands and probably doesn't even care. I'm sure he doesn't. But people out there looking at the contract, looking at the 5-year, $90 million, looking at that, people feeling that he hasn't lived up to expectations. But again, he's not caring about that. He's concerned about Patrick Williams developing. And I believe that he will develop even more on the defensive end, facing that position alone. And he has another opportunity. Giannis, Milwaukee, Friday night in the state of Wisconsin, Drew. So that's game 2 for the Chicago Bulls team. The season home opener for this Bulls team at the United Center will be Saturday night against some guy named Alex Caruso that I believe he used to play for the Bulls, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think won the headband, I think.
Yeah. Won the NBA's Hustle Award last year with the Bulls. Yeah. So he's bringing his new guys, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jalen Williams and Lou Dort and Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein and just a young, very, very exciting Thunder team to the United Center. So the work is going to be heavy for this Bulls team. I believe, again, after they go through their film sessions and their practices and their shoot-arounds, they will be ready for the fight. But again, if they can continue to build off of what we saw in the first half and carry that type of energy and keep that type of time for an extended ball game for 48 minutes, you're looking at a team that could surprise some people. But tonight was a good learning experience. Let's put it that way, Drew, for this Bulls team against the New Orleans Pelicans. Again, they dropped their first game of the season, 123-111 in New Orleans. But still, we got 81 more to go. And me, Cam Smith, and my man Drew Stevens of the Bigs were with you along the way, the entire season. So we got you. And always remember that the By the Horns podcast is presented by Toyota. Toyota has more all four-wheel drive vehicles and all-wheel drive vehicles more than any other brand in the nation. Everywhere, baby. Just know that you can find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. So shout out to Toyota for presenting the By the Horns podcast. We will see everybody soon.